Hello and welcome. This is Broadcast Focus and my name is Russell Trapper-Jones. Thanks for joining me. This channel where we look at the broadcast and media industries, talk to the people behind it and find out what's going on, or in this case, what was going on. We're going to look today at the history of a whole TV channel and our involvement in it. I'm very, very pleased to welcome Graham Collins to the show. How are you doing, Graham? Welcome.
Morning, Russell. All good, thank you. You?
All right, thank you very much. I saw you post on LinkedIn the other day, and it just, for some reason, it just brought back a lot of memories about what I think is one of the more interesting projects that I've worked on. So back in the day when I was part of a systems integrator, we, when I say that I did systems integration, people say, "What did you work on?" And sometimes it's really boring what you work on because it's just some broadcast that no one knows about, and you've created a new post-production suite for them or something, which is great, but it's not a dining room anecdote. So I usually come out and say that I worked on a movie in Coronation Street, and it was really good to go and visit the Coronation Street set, as was. I haven't seen it since it moved. It's the problem of being in the design phase and not in the project phase is you don't get to see what happened. But similarly, I think this one is really interesting, and because we worked on a channel which actually is a Persian channel going to Iran, which is pretty cool. So you were involved from the beginning, and how did the moment since then, which is quite a while ago, you've been involved in systems integration in general?
Yep. So my company, we've been running for 12 years, get involved in all things system integration. We're a small company, and we like to think we do quite a lot. So it can be supply and install turnkey solutions, studios, edit suites, that kind of thing. But we get involved a lot in software integration these days, as many do. But gluing different manufacturers' products together, making workflows all join up, particularly file-based workflows, is where we get involved.
And I think what's interesting about the this TV channel is that it's a whole broadcaster. It's not just getting some studios running. It was the whole deal. There's media asset management, there was distribution, and everything. So tell us who this was and how it all started, Graham.
Yeah, this was Persian TV Networks, and initially got involved with them with the same integrator issue. So TSL were appointed to design, supply and install a new studio production facility. So I was involved as the design lead and implementation lead for the Wimbledon Studios installation, where we put in, I think it was 3 studios initially, a playout control room, playout systems, of course, ingest, media asset management, and about a dozen edit suites. So a full, complete, compact TV station, doing an awful lot. So broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, producing 4 or 5 hours of original content themselves each day, which is a tremendous amount for a facility of that size, but also acquiring a whole load of content as well, relanguaging it, repurposing it, and then playing that out. So a complex, complete end-to-end facility.
It had a twist to it because it was broadcasting to Iran from Wandsworth. What's the background to that?
So they started off small. I think they had 2 channels at one point, and then decided to go down to 1 channel. But the Wandsworth studios that they were operating from was leased, and that lease was terminated when the owner of the building decided to sell up and turn the facility into a block of flats. So it was, I think, about a year from when they first contacted us to going on air with the new facility. So 1 year for scoping, finding out exactly what they needed to do, and then budgeting, design, and then detailed design implementation. So yeah, 1 year from first engagement from the customer to putting them on air in the new facility.
Did we work out when this was? I can't remember now. It's a while ago.
Yeah, I think it was about 2013. So 2013 into 2014 was the time period. So
was that the move from Wandsworth to Wimbledon?
Correct. Yeah, and they were on air for a few years before that.
Yeah, and we initially put them on air in Wandsworth, but the point, particularly back then, was that satellite was the key way of skirting regulations.
Absolutely. So yeah, they would play tag team with the Iranian authorities, who would jam their satellites. They actually had 2 or 3 different satellites that they were on. So if one was jammed, they'd lose a third of their audience, and their audience would move their dishes and rescan and try and pick up another satellite. But of course, advertising those satellite frequencies, you have to get that information to them somehow. That used to be played at the end of programs as a promo, saying what all the different frequencies are. The end viewers would have to scribble that down on a piece of paper and try and remember that. And next time the satellites got jammed, try and change again. So that was their initial challenge, trying to reach that audience.
Nothing more memorable than 11.278 gigahertz. I mean, it's not the first time that that satellite's been used to skirt broadcasting rules, because obviously as a company, as a broadcaster that does come dine with me and later on Spitting Image, I imagine there wasn't much that went on there which would have been officially sanctioned.
Yeah, you mentioned skirting rules. Of course, I have to say that Persian TV were broadcasting completely legally. They were doing nothing wrong. They were broadcasting on an Ofcom license in the UK. They had viewers all around the world, so lots in the US, fair few in the UK, and
a lot of expats.
A lot of expats, exactly. And broadcasting in the Middle East on satellites completely legally. What was, I believe, illegal was for the viewers to actually receive the content on the satellites in territory. But that, of course, was their decision. Obviously good to have that customer base viewing the content. But ultimately, Persian TV were absolutely professional broadcasting completely within the rules.
100%, and it's about finding out which rules and how to do what you need to do. And so, in terms of the broadcast, I think there's plenty. I mean, I guess if you look at all of the broadcasters in the world, there's plenty which are owned by somebody, and I want to broadcast, I want to have a media company, and but a lot of them seem to have this long history. This one ultimately is closed down, and so is that what was the impetus? Where was the money coming from, and does that make it a different broadcaster to deal with than it would be for a public broadcaster, but B, perhaps a longer running BT Sports style broadcaster?
Yeah, ultimately the channel was free to air, the money came from a number of sources, which I wasn't privy to. We can guess where that came from, but ultimately, yeah, it was funded by various donations. Various interested parties put money in the pot, and that's what kept it running. So as you can imagine, a 24-hour a day TV station producing that quantity of content is going to be quite an expensive venture. So it was always a challenge to get the funding to keep the channel going. And they did an incredible job right up until the last day. There was no drop off on quality. There was no compromise. It was an all or nothing all the way through.
Yeah, indeed. And as you say, they absolutely they understood how to do it well. But what was their attitude in terms of the technical delivery and what actually went into the building?
Yeah, it was an interesting customer from that point of view. So often we get involved with big state broadcasters, the likes of the BBC and similar around the world, and the well-funded commercial broadcasters who want lots of resilience and lots of complexity in their equipment, just to have the very best. Marjan TV was kind of the polar opposite of that. Their attitude was very much every pound that they put into new equipment had to support production. So I was constantly asked, if we install this, what does this do for the production? What does that change for our end viewers? Does it make it better for them? Do we make better programs? Can we make different programs? So the budgets were always about making better content and reaching the end user with that content. So things like resilience was a challenge for me as an engineer to say, look, we need to put in two of these, because if one fails, then you're going to go off air. And the question was inevitably, well, if that were to fail, what would be the impact? And those were the level of conversation. So it was always start at a minimum point in terms of technology, and then build up from that on an as needed basis. So yeah, keep everything running, make sure that we don't fall off air, but don't spend anything any more than we need to on any superfluous equipment that's just going to sit there and gather dust.
I think it sounds penny pinching, but I think the point is that it comes from a desire to make sure that you're doing the right thing and only going in one direction, which is better content or better delivery.
Absolutely, and if anyone's seen their content, it was really up there in terms of production quality and visual quality and indeed technical quality. So there was no impact in terms of the output from having those technology compromises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember touring the studios, and by then Spitting Image has stopped being shown on the UK screens, so it was really quite surprising to see all of the puppets around there. And the reason I bring that up is not only because I'm still fascinated by it, but puppetry isn't cheap. Finding people who can do good puppetry is not easy, and making the puppets isn't cheap either. So for them, that was the best way for them to make some content, and they're happy to invest in that. But the technology behind that we put in was there to be sufficient and not necessarily all bells and whistles. So that's good. And so it lasted for quite a number of years, and in that time the importance of satellite has changed because there's so much access over the internet. So what was their approach, and did that change the balance of how people watched?
Yeah, so they started with a limited streaming service initially, and had some small quantities of VOD catch up. They were using an all-in-one service for that. Because of the location of the majority of their viewers, that proved challenging. The authorities regularly would block the domain name, so viewers couldn't reach that content on the website. So I was asked to take a look at their VOD streaming and see if I could do something better with them. And collectively, we came up with some new workflows, some new technology, and not only improved the quality of the content, but also improved the accessibility of that content. So far more end users could reach that content and get a consistent and reasonably high quality streaming service from their mobile devices, from their computers, in a rather difficult territory to reach.
So what type of things can you do to get around domain names being blocked? It sounds pretty final.
Yeah, we found ways of not using domain names. I can't go into too much detail because it's a bit of proprietary technology that we developed, and obviously we'd like to keep that somewhat secret. We're always happy to talk to new customers who have similar challenges and help them with their problems. But ultimately, you mitigate that domain name problem by not using domain names. That requires specialized apps on mobile devices. We were working with Apple devices and Android devices. So we had a front-end app that would access the back-end services that I was responsible for. And we would regularly change things like IP addresses, so that if the authorities decided to block an IP address, we could simply change that. It was a little bit more sophisticated than that, but yeah, ultimately they were chasing us and finding out what we were doing, and then we'd try and stay one step ahead and change the way that we did things slightly to circumvent the way they were blocking us this week. And yeah, I'd occasionally in the early days when we developed this this new system, when we put it into service, it would all be fine for a week or two, and then you know, Twitter and Facebook would go crazy with people saying, I can no longer access the service. You know, what are you going to do about it? I'd get the call. It would be usually either very late at night or very early in the morning. I'd look at how we were being blocked and find a way of mitigating that. So it was an interesting challenge for a few months and kept me rather busy. But ultimately, we came up with a solution that made the changes that we needed to do on a regular basis. So no matter how many times they blocked IP addresses, blocked what we were doing, we would move on to a different way. And in the end, we moved on before they even had a chance to change us. So that's ultimately what we did.
And that back end, was that completely cloud-based?
It was, yeah. It's of course content comes from on premises, so you know, edit suites and MAM systems is the starting point, but we'd get that content to AWS as fast as we could. Once it was in AWS, we would transcode to the various HLS profiles for streaming, for live streaming, and for the VOD catch-up streaming. So that's the relatively easy bit. It gets a little bit more complex in terms of distribution. We used AWS CloudFront for that distribution, which is actually quite a straightforward service to use. You know, simply point your CloudFront at your source content, and it does all of the magic. So that was good. Choosing the HLS profiles was interesting. There's a balance between the bit rate. You can go for very high quality with high bit rates. You can have some profiles which are very low bit rates, which are low quality, which will reach people on low bandwidth internet connections. So that was one decision on what those profiles looked like, and we tweaked those from the kind of standard set that are recommended to something that would suit the customers that we had. So that's one parameter. Of course, as soon as you start reaching lots more people, then the distribution costs go up. So that's impacted by the bit rate that you use. So you can go for super high quality. If you've got 1 million viewers hitting that content at the very high bit rate, if you've doubled your bit rate, you've doubled your distribution costs. So keeping an eye on the costs was interesting. And I was in the early days called into the MD's office to explain the costs this month, and we look at the statistics, and we determined that actually this is good news because a lot more people were looking at the content than previously. Actually a 10-fold increase when we launched the new services, which was great. Nice problem to have, and quite good to go back to their investors and say, look, you know, we've got this extra cost this month, but it's because we've got 10 times more viewers. So
working.
It's working, which is good. Of course, then you can bring down the bit rate and try and maintain sufficient quality and try and get those costs under control. So we over the years that the service was running, we would you know, tweak every few months what those profiles look like, just to get the balance of cost, quality, reachability to end users.
What was the general kind of spread of connections for the viewers that I guess that you managed to infer from what people ended up watching? Did it feel like it was a bit of polar? My guess is it would be polarized into people who've got really good bandwidth, and then people who are eking out a 1 gigabyte monthly SIM or something, or perhaps just only had like bad reception.
Yeah, it's quite hard to gather those statistics, and that's something we always struggled with because of the nature of HLS streaming. As you will know well, Russell, from your current work, but HLS chops video into, we were down to 9-second chunks. You have a lot of chunks, and you have a lot of different profiles. We had 6 different profiles, trying to track who is watching what at what bit rate. Their player, of course, could start off at 2 megabits, which was our highest bit rate. Then they have a bit of a bottleneck on their internet bandwidth, and it'll drop down to some lower bit rates for a bit. So trying to track who is watching what, our service was very simple. We put the HLS packets on an S3 bucket in AWS, and then CloudFront would distribute those. So trying to work out who was actually hitting which packets at what time. We could do it to a certain degree, but the analytics, if you need to work out exactly who's looking at what, you've got to trawl through literally billions of individual transactions. We looked at how we might do that, but the cost of actually doing that analytics and the processing power required to do that actually cost almost as much as the distribution. So we decided, okay, we'll just look at the overall amount of data that's gone through CloudFront and try and work it out from there. But coming back to your original question, is it a split one or the other? Generally, it was generally the low end, so the low bit rate packets and the very high bit rate packets which were hit the most. So we had some of those analytics in the early days, and roughly a 50-50 split of people with decent connection looking on a decent TV with a set-top box pulling the high bit rate, and people with mobile devices at the other extreme.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess the reason there's a whole industry about streaming analytics is that it's not easy. So I think that's fair. Got a couple of pictures of what it all looked like, which I think would be nice to have a look through. So talk us through these studios.
Yeah, this is Studio A. This was their main studio, and unfortunately it's not properly lit up at that point, but you can just about see in there quite a lot of large LED screens. So they were really big on visuals and very big on branding. Had some very, very smart graphics and branding folk involved. But this was their main studio, the largest regular use one. This is the control room. They actually had one production control room that looked after all of the studios. So the studios were really about sets and lighting. They'd move the cameras from studio to studio between productions, but it would mean that they could rig a studio floor, get everything ready, and then just move the operation to point at that studio floor. But this is the production control room. We actually rebuilt this about 5 years into the operation. We had one night, so the last program went out at 9 p.m. And we needed to be ready. We actually had until 12 midday the next day to get the control room rebuilt. But it was complete rebuilds of the 2 desks that you see there and the monitor stack behind, all in an 18-hour period, effectively. So that was fun. This is their main office, so it's their production office. In the early days, that was their newsroom, and became the production office, and then went back to being the newsroom again. This was their final show for the final day, which was a 12-hour live event where they were touring the building, interviewing people in a small desk at the front of this office that you see there. So hence the fancy lighting.
So when was their last transmission?
So it was end of January. So it was last day was 31st of January.
This year?
This year.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't realize it's so close.
Yeah, only recent. Yeah, and I was fortunate enough to be there for the entire final production, and I saw them go off air at the end of the Iranian day.
Is this the same?
Same gallery. Yeah, that's during rehearsals.
Cool.
Sit from a different angle. So that's the rear desk. So camera, remote control panels, and lighting desk there. So technical services at the back of the production control room. And that's the sound control room. So Studio Vista sound desk. Nice desk to use. That one has served them well over the 10 years that it's been in there.
That's good. It's good to see. So I think perhaps I'll touch lastly then on the technical choices that we went through, and what would be different perhaps if they came back and said, "Oh, we want to start it all over again," as of 2025. So there's 1 year from engagement to transmission. So is there a case for a similar broadcaster of a similar size, which, to be clear, was not. It's in no way a small broadcaster, but I don't know what their viewing figures were, but they got a lot of people on streaming, and I think we can assume that worldwide they had a large viewership. So, given what you know about their operation, would it be obvious for them to implement an IP system, or are they a good example of someone who, yeah, SDI works, they should go ahead?
Yeah, it was an SDI infrastructure. And I remember that 10 years ago plus, when we were designing this, we were thinking, is IP ready? And it certainly wasn't back then. And for something that we needed to implement in a year, it wasn't going to work. During their journey, we actually ran out of router IO on their core router that we put in. We put in the biggest router we could find at the time that fitted the budget, and after 3 years, that was too small. So we put in a second studio router, and the inevitable SDI tie lines between the two. And that served them for another couple of years. And then they brought online some more studios, and we put in a third SDI router, again with tie lines between the two. So it all got very complicated in terms of the operation, and the production team began to struggle with it.
There's a lot of studios.
Exactly, and it wasn't as simple as pushing a couple of macro buttons anymore. It was a case of calling the engineers, who would scratch their heads and try and work out exactly what was going on. So if we were doing it again, IP would be absolutely the right way of doing it. The whole idea of not running out of endpoints. You can just put more on there, manage your bandwidth carefully, and you can expand as much as you like. So whether it would be 2110 for the studios or whether it would be NDI, I think that would be down to budget ultimately, and the cost of the network infrastructure that goes with that. But if I was designing Marjan TV's facilities again, it would certainly be IP based, and it would make complete sense. And I think the technology is mature enough now to make that happen. I suppose the complexity, ironically, is making it simple enough operation that you don't need to have engineers involved on a day-by-day, production-by-production basis. The whole challenge with Marjan TV, as it is with many customers out there, is making the operation simple to be able to switch flexibly between different operations. So if I want to change between one program setup and another on studio floor, and another from a single control room, doing that with just a couple of button pushes, without the operational team really having any understanding of what's going on underneath. That's where we need to get to. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're close.
Yeah, and I think them more than the many broadcasters did seem to specialize in the one space for 3 different programs kind of scenario. So they did expect to be turning around the studio space within an hour or two and doing a new program. So you've got to have things easy to do and quick.
You say an hour or two, that was luxury. We were talking 10, 15 minutes with the time some of the programs.
All more true then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I find it quite surprising how quickly SDI ports run out on routers, and it didn't seem to be the case, but it probably was back in the day. So yeah, I think it sounds to me like the scale, even of a relatively modestly sized broadcaster, it still pushes the envelope of, and I guess budget of, because to get a large router is really expensive, SDI router. I guess that makes sense. It just brings on other costs and complexities, as you say, as long as you can somehow keep them away from the people who just need to get on with their productions, then perhaps it's not so bad.
Yeah, I think the other challenge as well is being flexible. So being able to bring in a bit of equipment that does something, whether that's a camera, whether that's a temporary video wall, whether it's a replay server, and having the operations team be able to just rig that in without having to have an IT engineer reconfigure the network each time. So I say these days, my current thinking is there's still going to be a fair bit of SDI around for those endpoints. Convert it as close as possible to the device. So maybe in studio wall boxes, you have some SDI to IP and vice versa, and you have a collection of inputs and outputs for that, which are already configured onto the IP network. All of the control layer can be pre-configured for that, so you've got some flexibility built in. If you need to build a new studio, of course, then that needs some consideration, some design, but that was always the case with SDI anyway. But we need to maintain that flexibility of being able to operationally just rig something quickly without having to go through the whole infosec challenges and router bandwidth challenges and so forth, and just allow the operations team to get on with it.
But as you said earlier, you didn't know whether it would be a 2110 or an NDI infrastructure. I've been trying to find out for a number of years why broadcasters don't do both. And, I think there's plenty of space for NDI islands, for instance, within a broadcaster that has a larger 2110 infrastructure. And, that also would help with these ad hoc requirements if there was a mixture. And I think, fortunately, it's more due to the move to the cloud rather than anything that happened during COVID, I think. But because people are having to do production in the cloud increasingly, or they want to at least, that's bringing NDI into the world of major broadcasters. So I guess that would be one option for them.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Graham, for talking through that. That was really interesting. I think the only thing that I wish, now that we've spoken about that, is that the subscriber numbers on this channel rival the viewership numbers of Manoto, which I'm sure are well above the number of subscribers I've got at the moment. So please do click subscribe, whack a like on, and if you want to talk to Graham about this or any other integration-based topics across the whole broadcast chain, then you can get hold of him on this email address. Thanks, Graham. It's really good reliving the past, and I think for once, I think it's just really interesting that we've seen a whole story unfold from beginning to end. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Russell.